it would be no comparison. We can guard every position. Every guy from our point guard to our 5 can guard any position. We were big. We were long.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. And today's Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast is also brought to you by BetDSI. Use the promo code LOCKED10 and get a $10 free bet and 100% match deposit on your first deposit. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. The season is here. We are approximately 24 or 26. Let me try my maths again. 25 and a half hours away from opening tip-off as recording. You will obviously be listening to this a little bit later, but we're almost here. We're almost at the beginning of the season, and I, for one, I couldn't be happier. It's awesome, obviously. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be covering the latest news of the day, some roster cuts that have gone down, some injury news, and then getting into previewing the 3 games that we're going to have on Tuesday, getting into them from a DFS point of view, giving some picks that I like, some thought processes across all 3 games, as we do every day of the entire NBA season. A few people have asked me, hey, you're doing your picks of the day? Are you doing your DFS stuff? Yes, it's all the same as last year. Someone asked me today, are you still doing the podcast for DFS in addition to Locked On? Well, the podcast is the same. This is the same podcast as what it's been the last couple of years. Hopefully it keeps getting better, but it's the same thing. It's just got a different name. It used to be Red Rock Fantasy Basketball. Now it's the Locked On podcast. So many of you guys listening would never have heard of the podcast back when it was the Red Rock Fantasy Basketball podcast, which was only back in June or July, but the listenership of this podcast has jumped hundreds of %, which is an awesome thing for all you guys listening, for me as well, and for the growth of the show. So I welcome everyone who has never listened to the show in season before. This is what we do. We do season-long stuff. We do DFS stuff. We cover all the news. We answer your questions. And Michael Bolton introduces every show. So
let's get to it.
But before we get into everything else, let's talk about BetDSI, because they are today's sponsor of the podcast. They are a website where you can place your bets. If you love basketball, you should be ready to get into the action. You got to check out betdsi.com. It's been in business for over 20 years. It's a top-rated business. It's safe. I know plenty of people that play over on that site for you guys in the States, where it is hard to get legal gambling happening. You can do it here. betdsi.com has a great basketball special. You sign up today and you get $10 free to try their service. BetDSI is also offering a 100% bonus on your first deposit. Great customer service, fast and easy payment of winnings. There's hundreds of basketball wagers, football wagers, election wagers, MMA wagers. Everything is available on betdsi.com. It's even got live in-game wagering on all football and basketball and other major sporting events. You can play virtually anything at BetDSI. Go to betdsi.com. That's betdsi.com. Go there and use the promo code LOCKED10, LOCKED10. Get your free wager and start winning today. Very straightforward. The other way that obviously you can go to LockDSI, load yourself up with your $10 free deposit, and that supports the podcast. The other way you can do it is by buying a t-shirt. Now, I've started designing some t-shirts. You may like them, you may not. We've got a few designs up there at the moment. You can see if you're watching on the video, the website is there. It's tpublic.com. This is all linked on the show notes for the podcast as well. tpublic.com/user/redrock_bball. The same as my Twitter account. So you can go and listen. You can go and look over there. I think there's 5 designs up in the store. There is a Porzingis one. There's a Ravishing Rick Rubio t-shirt. There's a Lord Alfred Payton one. There's an Evan Fournier one up there as well. And for any AFL Western Bulldogs fans, which is completely about 2 people listening to this podcast, there's a Bulldogs Premiership t-shirt up there that I've designed. I'm going to be putting a few new ones up at the moment. Going to be some designed by a friend of mine, Sam Macy, who you may know on Twitter at Macetastic, who does great designs for team logos and stuff like that. We're going to turn some of his designs into t-shirts too, so there's going to be a few new ones coming up over the course of the week as well. That's another way you can help support the podcast and hopefully get some cool t-shirts that you can wear around. And for the next couple of days, the t-shirts are all $14, so they're pretty cheap, and that's a good way that you can you can help support the podcast. All right, let's talk about the news in the NBA at the moment, because there's things happening. We're talking about roster cuts and things like that. So let's talk about everyone's down to their 15-man roster now. Some of them are pretty expected, some of them are not so expected. The Phoenix Suns made one of the more not so expected moves in the roster cut season. They cut Archie Goodwin. We thought that John Jenkins was a huge chance to go. He remained on the roster. Goodwin's gone. Now, Goodwin's a former first-round pick who's shown flashes. He had some decent run last season, but it was clear that Earl Watson wasn't a fan. He was playing big minutes, but as soon as any player came back, Goodwin is kicked from the rotation. Now, he's only 21 or 22 years old, I believe. I think that he definitely will get picked up somewhere. He has a real struggle shooting threes. He barely can get to 30% shooting threes, and that's his concern. But he is super athletic. He is aggressive at charging at the rim. He can do quite a few things, and I would definitely be looking at him if I was another team and just seeing what I can do with him. But Archie Goodwin gone for now. John Jenkins remains on the roster. The Suns also kept Derek Jones Jr., which is a weird one to keep over a guy like Goodwin, but that's the direction they've gone. Obviously, it goes without saying that Derek Jones Jr. and John Jenkins aren't going to have a very big fantasy impact, if they have any sort of impact at all this season. So Goodwin wasn't going to have much of an impact there as well, but just be aware that he is not on a team, but he could find himself. I think the Milwaukee Bucks should really have a look at Archie Goodwin. We know that they've got a big turd sandwich playing at number 2 at the moment. Unironically, I didn't mean to say it that way. But Tony Snell, Rashad Vaughn, these guys are useless. Goodwin is better than both of them already. He's clearly better than Vaughn, and he's better than Snell, in my opinion. I think that the Bucks should definitely consider looking at getting Archie Goodwin over in Milwaukee and challenge for that spot. The Los Angeles Lakers made some roster moves. Ijan Lian has not made the roster. He requested that he get released because he wasn't enough playing time, so he's going to go back to China. They also surprisingly waived Anthony Brown, a high second-round draft choice from last season. He is now gone, so he's off the roster, and they kept Thomas Robinson and Metta World Peace. Now, Mitch Kupchak, Metta World Peace, he was dreadful last season, horrible, absolutely disgusting as a player. I think he shot 30% from the field. I understand that you want to get some veteran leadership potentially in there, but is World Peace that guy? I hate saying World Peace. Is he that guy? Is he your veteran leader? I know he's matured a lot. I know he's mellowed a lot, but really? Anthony Brown's a guy that was dealing with foot fractures all last season. He started a few games when Kobe was out, and I think he can develop. It's a weird move to me. Thomas Robinson, a lot of people have high hopes for Thomas Robinson. He's bounced around the league. Houston, Portland, Sacramento, Brooklyn. He showed some things last year in Brooklyn. He actually upped his block rate, and he's been a notoriously horrible shot blocker and defender. He's a really energetic rebounder, but his shooting has always been poor. Where does he find minutes in Los Angeles? There's not many around. He's going to be behind Julius Randle. He's going to be behind Larry Nance at the power forward spot. At center, there's Tariq Black, there's Ivica Zubac, and there's obviously Timofey Mozgov. So he's going to be right down the bottom of the rotation. So he's not really worth looking at in any sort of fantasy format at this point. But he's a name to keep an eye on, because you know if he gets out there and plays minutes, the rebounds are going to come. He's going to be a guy that gets double-doubles, not unlike Julius Randle, but just doesn't help in other areas and actively hurts in his free throw percentage and his lack of big man stats as a general rule. But he's made the final roster, so good luck to Thomas Robinson. Beno Udrih, who was cut by the Miami Heat in one of the more curious moves, and I say curious because there was clearly shenanigans going on here. Last season, the Heat waived Udrih when he was injured. They got him to take a buyout, not the full amount of his salary, so they could get themselves under the luxury tax. And at the time, people were saying, this is just a deal, so they're going to re-sign him next season. And they did exactly that. So basically, he took less money last year, or he took no money to get, as a favour to the Heat, to get them under the luxury tax with a wink, nod, handshake promise that he's going to be re-signed, which he was, and then they waived him at his full cost so that he could get that payout that he missed out on last season. Really shifty stuff. The other NBA teams hated that. Udrih now has, though, he's been claimed by the Pistons, so the Heat aren't on the hook for any of his money, so they got out of this like bandits. Not that it was a huge amount of money, like $1 million or $900,000 or whatever it was. It wasn't a huge amount of money in the scheme of the NBA, but still, Beno Udrih got away with it. Not Beno Udrih. The Miami Heat got away with it. Now, Udrih heads to Detroit. At the moment, Detroit hasn't made that final cut yet. They did get down to 15. Udrih comes in as the 16th guy. With Reggie Jackson out, they might be looking to replace Ray McCallum, who made the roster as the third point guard, as the 15th man. He might be gone, so Udrih moves into that role, which would put him as the backup point guard to begin the season. And deeper league players, 20 teams, 30 teams, you're going to need to pay attention to Udrih, because despite having the absolute worst haircut in the NBA at the moment, and that's a big statement, but he has got an absolute stinker sitting up on top of his head. He can put up some numbers. Now, he is past it, he is old, but in 20 minutes, could he get 4 or 5 assists? Yeah, could that be useful in a 16-teamer? Potentially, at least until Reggie Jackson's out. So watch that situation with Beno Udrih in Detroit now that he has signed there. The next one, Boston, they were always in the roster crunch. They had 16 guaranteed roster spots. It was going to come down to James Young and RJ Hunter, and I'm stunned, but James Young won the spot. RJ Hunter's gone. He's been waived. He was around for one season, and he did struggle at times. He showed a little bit to me in the playoffs, but not a huge amount. But James Young has showed exactly zero. I didn't think that he was good in preseason. He was better, but I didn't think he was good. He struggled in Summer League, whereas Hunter, I thought was excellent in Summer League. A weird move. Milwaukee should be looking at RJ Hunter as a potential solution to their issue at the 2-guard spot. Weird move to me to retain, especially when you've got control over Hunter for longer than what you do with James Young. Maybe that was part of the point. Maybe they just said, well, we just want this guy off the books. We're going to decline his option, whatever, rather than have to deal with another guaranteed year of Hunter. I don't know. In terms of players, I prefer Hunter at this point, but he is gone and he is now available for people to pick up. So, other teams, have a look at him. If you're in a dynasty league, just hold just to see what happens, because again, there are minutes at shooting guard for some teams in the league, and RJ Hunter is a knockdown 3-point shooter. Well, he was in college. He hasn't really shown that in the NBA, but he could do that at some point. So he is worth considering, or at least watching to see where he falls. The New Orleans Pelicans, the final roster spot was coming down to Alonzo G and Lance Stevenson. Lance has got the job. All you Lance Stevenson lovers, you rejoice, and you can love the fact that he's going to get 12 minutes a night. I've said this, people are going, do I have to draft Lance Stevenson? He's a top 100 guy because everyone's out. And this is my thought on Lance. I've said it plenty of times, but I'll say it again for you new listeners. It took him until mid-August to get signed. He's on a veteran minimum deal, and he had to battle with Alonzo G for the final roster spot. He's not going out there and all of a sudden going, all right, boys, don't worry, everyone, Lance is here. Give him the ball, step back, and let this shit kicker just do whatever he needs to do. He's not a good basketball player. He's had one season in Indiana where he was extraordinarily overrated during that time. Anyway, he's just not good anymore. He's going to play a role with Tyreek and Drew Holiday out, no doubt. He's going to play a role in terms of creation, but he's going to be behind Etuan Moore, Buddy Hield, Langston Galloway, Tim Frazier at the moment as a fifth guard on this roster. So we're talking 20-plus teams deep to really be considering Lance Stevenson. And when Tyreek comes back, when Drew Holiday comes back, or if Tyreek comes back, when Drew Holiday comes back, he's just not going to see the court at all. Maybe he has a renaissance, but nothing in preseason has shown me that. Nothing last season in Memphis or with the LA Clippers has shown me that. Don't put any faith in Lance. 30-team league, sure, grab him. Let's see how it works out. But in any other sort of format, I don't really think that we need to be getting overly excited about Lance Stevenson. A couple of other injury news, just to clarify, Jared Sullinger, we had that issue with him having the foot and the surgery. He's going to be out between 2 to 3 months, so obviously there's no point holding on to him in any 12-team leagues, probably even 14-team leagues. He was a borderline top 120 guy anyway. He's out for 2 to 3 months, and Jared Bayless with his wrist issue is going to be out for 4 weeks. So that makes Sergio Rodriguez and TJ McConnell interesting if we knew who was going to get more minutes. I like Rodriguez a little bit more from a fantasy point of view because he gets those hard-to-get assists, but if he's playing 18 minutes and McConnell's playing 30, well, that's not much use to you. But let's see how it pans out. Let's see what happens over the next 24 hours. But you're not going to have Bayless for the first 4 weeks. Obviously, he's not worth holding on to in any sort of standard format either. I don't think that needs me to really go into that too much more. All right, that is all the news of the day done. So let's start talking DFS. Let's get into the first game, which we're going to do right now, and that is the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. NBA is back. I know all of you guys are wrapped. We're talking about the Cavs here heading into home, have their ring ceremony, get ready to be proclaimed as champions, which is a pretty exciting time for the Cavs and for Cleveland fans as well, obviously. The Cavs are heavy favourites here, 9.5 point favourite. They've got a decent over-under for this. Just quickly, before I get into this game, when I reference prices, I am referencing FanDuel prices. What I did last year at the end of the DFS segment, let's start again. DFS, I go through each game, I go through each position in each game and talk about all the players, and then at the end, I give recommended type picks. And again, I don't just throw out a lineup, because that defeats the purpose of anything, really. You don't want to just use my lineup. And for people who think that I might be misleading you guys, I can't play on FanDuel. I can't play on DraftKings. So any information I give you, I'm not... And some people have this conspiracy theory that people who talk about fantasy sports go out there and deliberately provide misleading information or withhold information so they can win the big prize pools. I can't enter them. I can't enter FanDuel. I can't enter DraftKings. I can't do any of this. So there's no benefit in me withholding any information so I can play my lineup and go and win $1 million. It just doesn't happen. Anyway, what I do then at the end is I go through and I would give point guards. Here's a cheap guy, a guy priced under 5,000. Here's a mid-price guy that I like, and here's an expensive guy that I like, and do that for all 5 positions. This year I'm also going to be doing that for DraftKings. So at the end you'll see a FanDuel list, you'll see a DraftKings list. It differs a little bit with DraftKings. We've had some changes this season. There's no late swap anymore on DraftKings. They have introduced position eligibility, so some guys are dual position eligible, and the difference between FanDuel and DraftKings is the scoring system. You get double bonuses, 3-point bonuses on DraftKings, 8 guys as opposed to 9 guys, 50,000 salary cap as opposed to 60,000 salary cap. So there are differences between them, and the major difference introduced to DraftKings is the no late swap and the return of dual position eligibility, which gives you more flexibility with your structuring of your lineups. In saying all that, let's go back now and talk about the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Again, the Cavs are favored by 9.5, so it's the highest spread on the night. The highest there, 9.5 is the total at 198.5 is pretty decent. And why do we look at totals? The higher a total is for a game, the more scoring there is, the more points, the more assists, generally the more rebounds, the faster pace of a game. So all that stuff is really interesting for fantasy. So you tend to target teams who have got a high over-under. Low over-unders, it'll work sometimes, but you steer away from them in general. And the spreads we look at, if it's a huge spread, then there's a chance of it being a blowout. So guys might get rested and players might not play as much, and you run into that risk. So an ideal situation is a huge over-under, a 210 over-under with a spread of like 1. That's a perfect situation when looking at DFS. You get spreads of 11 or 12, not a great idea. Over-unders of 192, 191, not great either. So that's why I reference that when I look at it. New York, Cleveland. Cavs are the reigning champions. The Knicks are terrible. This is a pretty decent spread. And we've heard all this talk, and LeBron's, he's going to rest, he's going to sit out minutes. We've heard it a little bit before from LeBron in the past, and it means not playing 37 minutes. It means playing 36. He finds it really hard just to take this time off. And for everyone who said, oh, LeBron, he took it easy in the regular season, he did. He still played 36 minutes a night, though, so that is going easy for him. Does it mean he plays 35? Does he maybe play 33 or 34 in this one? Yeah, it's a possibility just because of the nature of who they're playing against. But let's look at the point guards first. I really like Kyrie Irving here. He's priced at 7,100. Again, these are FanDuel prices. You're going up against Derrick Rose, or you're going up against Brandon Jennings, or maybe they're throwing Sasha Vujacic in there. Whatever. The defense is not going to be good. It's a generally high-paced sort of situation. Now, Cleveland's a slow-paced team. New York is a high-paced team. That evens it out to that mid-range over-under. But Kyrie going up against Derrick Rose or Brandon Jennings is a really good spot for him. He's at 7,100. All he needs to really do is return you 35 points, which is not a tough thing, I think, for him to do. And given he'll be playing 30-plus minutes here, I really like Kyrie. On the other side, Derrick Rose, he's not terrible either. Now, Kyrie's not known for his defense. Rose is priced at $6,000. He's obviously not going to be in the greatest of shape, having missed a whole chunk of preseason attending his trial, but he's back now. It doesn't appear he's going to be under any minutes limits, according to Jeff Hornacek, so that's good news for Derrick Rose. At $6,000, if you're looking to skimp a little bit, I don't think his value is quite the same as Kyrie's in terms of in terms of value, not just total points, but he's not far behind. So the point guards in this one are definitely situations you want to look at. Brandon Jennings, not so much. For Cleveland, we've got Kay Felder, who's been ruled out, and he's their backup point guard at this point. So I think we're going to be seeing a bit of Geordie McRae as the backup point guard. And that's not really all that interesting for anyone. The Cavs could also make a move in the next day or so to bring in another point guard, but they don't really have much at that position at the moment. Let's now look to the shooting guards. There's not... Now, Iman Shumpert had a DUI. I was expecting a suspension to come down for him. It hasn't as of yet, so it looks like he's going to be ready to go. Shooting guards, there's not a huge amount that I love in this game when we look at it. I don't hate... Look, if you wanted to go cheap, and there's no real high-priced shooting guards on the board in any of the games, Klay Thompson, but he's not upper echelon price. In this one, there's nothing. It's all cheap options that you can consider in a GPP in a tournament-style setting. J.R. Smith, one of those guys at 4,500, maybe. Not overly enthused there. Courtney Lee at 3,900. If you're going big and getting LeBron, KD, Curry, Kawhi, all these guys into your lineup and you need to save money, shooting guard is the spot to do it at. 3,900 for Courtney Lee. I'm not overly excited about that. He has done pretty well against Cleveland in the past, and pretty well is relative to what his talent level is, but he's only at 3,900, so that's a pretty cheap price for Courtney Lee, so I like it. Iman Shumpert is a nothing. Geordie McRae, look, if the game is somewhat of a blowout, if J.R. Smith is not quite in shape, if Shumpert remains terrible, I could sort of see Geordie McRae in one of, if I had 20 tournament lineups, I could see Geordie McRae going in there at 3,500 and you could get 18 points out of him. Could he score 14 points in 14 real life points in 14 real life minutes? He could. So that's a possibility. So Geordie McRae, really deep sort of tournament cut, but you never know, I guess. I think that's the way of phrasing that. At small forward, we've got Melo going up against LeBron. Melo's at 8,000, LeBron's at 9,600. I like LeBron here. I'd rather spend up and grab LeBron at that price. Melo at 8,000. I think he's going to be good this season. Do I think he's going to be good enough to get $8,000 when he goes up against LeBron? In general, he hasn't been awesome against LeBron. He's been okay, but he hasn't been fantastic. I can see using both guys, but I would rather, and I think you can have that ability to save some money and grab a guy like LeBron, and that's the way that I'd be going. The other guys, Mike Dunleavy, Mindaugas, Kuzminskas, Lance Thomas, Richard Jefferson, they're obviously not troubling the scorers too much from a DFS point of view. At power forward, this is one that I like for a couple of reasons. This is the guy that I think you want to get here. Also, he's at $6,900.
Excellent!
So, Kristaps at $6,900. I like him here. I think he's going to be in for a monster season. Now, the one thing you look at with Kristaps is that last season, power forwards going up against the Cavs, despite the fact that Kevin Love was there, defensively they really excelled against big men. Yeah, Tristan Thompson was a big part of that. I don't think Tim Mozgov was a huge part of that because he didn't play all that much, but Thompson's a huge part in defending those guys. But at $6,900 for Kristaps, I do really like that price. Kevin Love's at $6,800. Yeah, he's done well against New York in the past. I think he's more of a tournament option to me. I'd rather spend the extra 100 and put Porzingis in. But in a tournament, if you want to go maybe against the grain, Love at 6,800. He could easily drop 37, 38 points, and that could be useful for you in this sort of a setting. He might not, but he could easily get to 35. It's not that big of a stretch. The center position, there's a couple of interesting things here. I think a lot of people will be interested in Joakim Noah. I'm not really one of them. He's only priced at 5,000 though, so it's not a big salary that you're getting in there. But again, the Cavs were really good defending against big men last season. Noah, we don't know exactly how many minutes he's going to play. I don't think he gets to 30 minutes. I don't think there's any chance he gets to 30 given his health and the fact that they're going to be wanting to, not hold him back, but I guess keep him fresh. I like the other side. I like Tristan Thompson at 4,800. I think that it is cheap. That's $200 less. And I think that you can get 20 plus points out of him pretty comfortably. Get 23, maybe even 25 points out of him. Noah, is maybe, I was going to say a little bit safer. You feel a little bit more confident about getting those extra points out of him in a cash game setting. In a tournament, though, I reckon I would want Thompson. I think he's going to have a bigger season than what people are predicting, just because Mozgo's not there. He didn't play 30 minutes a night last year, Tristan Thompson. So I think that he's going to be able to get extra minutes this season. I think his rebounding will be key. And I do think that he's worth having a look at, definitely. The next game we're going to take a look at is the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers. I know everyone has been waiting to see this Utah Jazz team play. I know I have been. Obviously, injuries are not working in their favour. They're not going to have Gordie Hayward for this one. They're not going to have Alec Burks, and Burks is not going to be around for the start of the season, maybe the first couple of weeks at this point. We know Hayward's out until mid to late November with his finger issue. Derek Favors is questionable. Now, it's looking like he will play. The lack of late swap on DraftKings means he's going to be hard to use until we hear some more concrete information on any site, really, without late swap. It's going to be hard to use Derek Favors in that situation. Boris Diaw's also nursing a leg bruise, but he's going to be right to go. On Portland side of things, Festus Ezeli is the only one who is out at the moment with a knee problem. That's not going to have too much of an impact on us. When we look at the game, we look at the Blazers, who are favoured by 5.5 points. The total is 192.5. So we're talking about the Jazz are the slowest paced team in the NBA. It's a low over-under of 192.5. That doesn't mean there's no value here, but yeah, it's not great. But the fact that it's predicted to be the tightest game is appealing to us, and there is definitely some value plays here. At point guard, if you've got money left over, I like Dame Lillard here at 8,900. Now, it's not the best value play. It's more like if you've just got cash sitting around, you've built your lineup and you've got cash around, and you go, I've got money and I can splurge on a point guard. Lillard's a guy that I do like here at less than $9,000. He's projecting himself to be the MVP. I don't think he's really got much chance of that, but he can put up good numbers. Now, at 8,900, you want him to crack 45 points potentially, and that's a stretch for him. His last 3 games against Utah have yielded him 42 points on average, so he's not far off it. I do like using him here. The Jazz guys, Georgie Hill at 5,600. Which George Hill are we going to get? 2014-15 George Hill, 15-16 George Hill. I think the answer is somewhere in between. If it was 14-15 George Hill at 5,600, you'd be all over it. If it's 15-16 George Hill, you don't want any part of that, really. At 5,600, I like using him in a tournament setting, just in case maybe he drops the 30-point game on people. But yeah, my overall love for him in this situation is not high. Dante Exum at 3,500. With Gordie Hayward out, Exum is going to have to play a little bit of extra minutes. He's fully recovered from his ACL, given the fact that he did it like 15 months ago. I don't think he's going to be in that situation, say like Jabari Parker was to start last season, where it took him 2 months to knock the rust off. Exum's been knocking the rust off for 2 or 3 months, and he's ready to go. He's going to absorb some extra minutes. He looks like a different guy. His minimum salary on FanDuel at 3,500. I think that's good. I think that's really nice value to go and use Dante Exum there, especially in a tournament setting. Obviously, Shelvin Mack, we're not really paying any attention to as the third string point guard on this team. Let's look at the shooting guards here. Rowdy Hoodie. That's a terrible name. 5,400 for Rod Hood. He's going to be absorbing a couple of Gordie Hayward's minutes. He was going to be playing big minutes anyway, but more importantly to me, he absorbs some of Hayward's usage and some of his ball handling. And some of that goes to George Hill, so that makes George Hill that little bit more appealing as well. But onto Hood, he's at 5,400. I think the chances of him dropping a 30-point game are really high in this setting. He is one of the guys that I think should be a nice foundation, and it allows you then to go bigger at point guard on Lillard, go bigger at small forward on LeBron or Kawhi or Durant or any of these guys we're going to talk about. I really like using Rod Hood here. And the other thing is he's going up against CJ McCollum, who's a horrible defender. McCollum, on the other hand, goes to take on the Jazz, and their defense is really good, and they do limit wing players pretty significantly. Now, without Hayward there, Hood's not a good defender. He's not CJ McCollum bad, but he's not a good defender as such. But they're going to throw Exum onto CJ McCollum sometimes, and Exum is good. So if I'm paying an extra $1,500 for CJ McCollum, it definitely doesn't make me as excited. Now, he's had good games against the Jazz in the past, averaging almost 40 across his last 3 last season. That's obviously impressive stuff. But do I want to spend that extra $1,500 on CJ? Maybe I've got the extra $1,500 around. and that might be worth it. But when I'm building a lineup, I think I want to go with that cheaper option at Hood and spend up it in other positions. Alan Crabb, who last night I was doing a roto draft, a 13-man roto draft, 8 category. Alan Crabb went at pick 67. I almost fell off my chair, and I wasn't even sitting on a chair. I was laying on the couch. I could not believe that. Anyway, at 4,200, Alan Crabb just does not move the needle for me in a DFS point of view, really, in the FanDuel scoring system. You'll hear when I talk about DraftKings later, I don't mind him as much. In FanDuel, not quite as much. Small forwards, there's really nothing to get me too excited here. Evan Turner and Mo Harkless are both priced at 5,600. That's too expensive for my taste. Yes, Harkless is going to start, but it doesn't mean 30 plus minutes. It means he's going to start, and then he's going to give way to Evan Turner, and then he's going to have to give way to Alan Crabb as well. So don't love it there for Mo Harkless. On the Jazz side of things, you got to be replacing Gordie Hayward with Joe Ingles and Joe Johnson. I think Joe Johnson gets most of those minutes, but he's at price at 5,400. That's not a salary I want to invest in using Joe Johnson. And Joey Ingles at 3,500. I'd want Joe Johnson to get injured before I start considering Joe Ingles there. As much as I do like Joe Ingles, former guest of the podcast. Maybe I'll look to get Joe back on the podcast, I reckon, this season at some point. Anyway, power forwards. Here is where a conundrum lies, I think. Trey Lyles is priced at $4,000. I think you have to use him. If Derek Favors doesn't play, he's going to go through the roof. If Derek Favors does play, he's still going to play 24 minutes, 23 minutes. And at $4,000, you could easily get 20 points out of Trey Lyles in 24 minutes. He plays 30 minutes. You could get 26, 27 points out of him, and that smashes expected value. And it smashes your 5x. He could be 7, 8x potentially. Trey Lyles is awesome in a GPP, but I also think that in cash, even at the bare minimum at 4,000, and he's in that backup role, he has to be considered. Now, Derek Favors looks appealing at 6,900. The Blazers, they're not great defensively in the front court. He's going to be matching up against Al-Farouq Aminu, which definitely has the talent, ability, and the size advantage there. But is he going to play? That's what we don't know. So at this point, he's not someone that I'm including in my lineups because we just don't know if he's going to play yet. And that is not a great situation, especially when it's not the opening match of the night. So Favors, let's just wait to see if we get more news. But even if he plays, I don't imagine that he plays his full complement of minutes. He might be a little bit rusty and play a couple less, so that makes him less appealing. On the Blazers side of things, Myers Leonard, Ed Davis, they're both sub $4,000, but I don't think they're going to get enough run to really excite me too much. Whereas Al-Farouq Aminu at $5,000, is that interesting? Yeah, he had a great playoff series, but at $5,000, can Al-Farouq get to 2,500 points against a Jazz team who's defensively really good in that front court? If Favors is out, I look to Aminu a little bit more because he'll have to deal with Lyles, and one of the things that Lyles is not good at is defense. If he's playing against Gobert and Favors, then there's real trouble for Al-Farouq Aminu. But if he's matching up against Lyles, it's not a terrible situation at 5,000 for him to get to 25 points. I think you're looking more at a 20, 21 point performance for Aminu, and that's not the best way to go about it. Noah Vonleh, Boris Diaw, I don't think they're going to play enough to really be considered. At center, love Rudy Gobert at 6,200 here. It's relatively expensive, but he's had an awesome preseason. He's looked great, and if Favors is out again, which we're 50-50 on that at the moment, Gobert could even go bigger than this. I think he's a solid tournament guy. I think he's a solid cash guy as well, Gobert. He's looked great in preseason. He's getting more happening offensively. I think that's a really nice price for him. On the flip side, Mason Plumlee, not a great defender, so that goes in Gobert's favour. Now, Plumlee racks up assists. He gets some rebounds, but I don't think he's getting 30-plus minutes. Ed Davis, Myers, Leonard are going to have to get some minutes behind him here. Even they might throw Vonleh out there for 5-6 minutes or so, and that's going to limit what Plumlee can do. So at 5,500, it's only 700 more to get Rudy Gobert into your lineup, and I think that's the way that I would definitely. Well, that's the way that I would want to be playing it. The last game of the night, we're talking about a very looked forward to matchup I guess the San Antonio Spurs and the Golden State Warriors. We get to see the Warriors in full regular season mode, I guess, for the first time. They are favoured by 9 points, the Warriors. The Spurs, how are they going to look? you can say how the Spurs are going to handle having no Tim Duncan last season. When Duncan played against the Warriors, he was unplayable anyway, so it's not much of a change there, and they actually get Pau Gasol in there. Let's see how that works defensively. But the Warriors are still favoured by 9 points. The total is a massive 211, which is great. It's superb for DFS. You would imagine that the Warriors are going to be playing at a pretty breakneck speed for most of the season, and that increased pace comes not because they're just playing crazily, but because they're just playing with such efficiency. That's what's going to happen. It's going to allow these guys to get extra touches. Let's look at the point guard position. There is no Danny Green. He's out for the Spurs. Jonathan Simmons is also listed as probable. He's likely going to play. He had a calf problem, so he's likely going to play. But the only issue here we're dealing with is Danny Green. So that means the starting two-guard job is open. Kyle Anderson's going to start there, but that doesn't mean that Patty Mills doesn't get some extra minutes there. Mills is not really a point guard. He is just a scorer. He's a little bit too small to guard shooting guards, and he could get destroyed by Klay Thompson, but I do think he gets a couple of extra minutes. So if you're looking for a cheap option at point guard, I don't think you shouldn't be looking too far past Patty Mills. Probably more of a tournament guy, but at 3,900, can he get you 20 points? He can. I think he's worth a look, but he's probably more tournament than cash to me. Curry at 9,300, what does he do? Does he play the whole game? Do they play him 30 minutes? We don't know at that point, and that makes him really hard to trust in a cash game setting. 9,300 for Curry, could he get you 45 points? Yeah, but I'd rather spend 400 less, take Dame Lillard, and I know that Dame Lillard's going to play minutes and play big minutes. I'm not sure that Curry necessarily is. His upside is obviously there, but at 9,300, it's not necessarily the direction I want to head in. Tony Parker at 5,000, don't. I think he's going to get torched defensively. It's a nice situation given that it's a high-paced game, but yeah, probably not going to go with Tony Parker. The other thing with Steph is that he might get Kawhi switched onto him. The good thing is, though, he doesn't get Danny Green switched onto him. And Danny Green's an awesome defender of Steph Curry in general. So he gets a little bit of a win there, but it's still not an ideal matchup when you have to go against Kawhi. At shooting guard, Klay Thompson is the big name here. He's priced at 6,500, so he's not overly expensive. I don't hate using him. And again, without Danny Green there, if he's going to match up on a guy like Jonathan Simmons or on Patty Mills, he clearly has the size advantage. He's looked great in preseason. I still think more of a tournament guy than a cash game setting. Manu Ginobili at 3,600 is also a tournament option. He's going to get some extra run with Green out. 3,600 is minimum salary. Can Manu get 18 points? Yeah, he can. It's not a lock. It's not a cash game reliable situation, but if you're looking to save money, you could do worse than getting one of these cheap Spurs guys like Mills or like Ginobili, or like the next guy I'm going to talk about, which is a guy that I'm more happy about using, and that is Kyle Anderson, who's a small forward who's priced at 3,500 minimum salary. You would think he's going to get 30 minutes here replacing Danny Green. He gets steals in bucket loads. He can get assists. He's a decent rebounder. He'll score a little bit as well. At 3,500, almost has to be in all your cash game lineups, I think, and allow yourself to build around other positions. Now, he's not a must because there are some other big name, high price small forward guys, especially in a restrictive roster build setup like FanDuel. Maybe it's not the best. But in, say, like DraftKings, where you've got the guard forward utility spot, maybe he can slide in one of there, or one of those other big names can slide into those positions as well. But Kyle Anderson at 3,500, love him. Kawhi at 7,900, he hasn't been awesome against the Warriors in the past, but at 7,900, I do like him at that price tag. I think that the high pace is going to suit him. We'll see how he goes in this role with his new teammates. He's not dead yet. His new teammates. I like him at 7,900. John Simmons at 3,500, not really interesting for me. And KD at 9,300. It falls into that similar zone as Steph Curry. The same price for these guys. How much are they going to play? How much are they going to seed? If we look at what's happened in preseason, they're not really giving up a huge amount. But 9,300 for Kevin Durant. I would rather take LeBron at 96. I would probably prefer to take Melo at 8,000 and Kawhi at 7,900. But it all depends on how much salary you've got left. But 9,300 for Kevin Durant, when you look at it on the surface, it looks like a real steal. But yeah, there is definitely some risk there. And he's probably more of a tournament play than a foundation of a cash game lineup at this point. At power forward, LaMarcus Aldridge at 7,400. significant price drop for Udrih. You've seen him much higher than that in the past. At 7,400, that's not a huge salary. I think that he is okay to use. He's not standing out as a beacon of like, I have to use Udrih, but I do like him at that price. Dave West at 3,800, tournaments only. And 8,200 for Draymond. I'm definitely staying away from Draymond at 8,200. I don't like that matchup. I don't like the way that he's really been used in preseason, which some of that is preseason, but I don't want to spend 8,200 on that and have that value go to waste when he only puts up 30 points. Look, it could be a contrarian tournament play, but he's not a cash game situation. At center, we've got Pau Gasol at 7,600. How does he fit in San Antonio? I think he's going to score a bit. High-paced game suits all these scorers, but not overly enthused with using him. Zaza at 4,800. How many minutes is Zaza going to get? That's a tournament play only, but not a strong one. And Dwayne Dedmon is the backup center in San Antonio. Yeah, I don't think we need to be looking at Dwayne Dedmon all that seriously. So that is all of the games done. Only 3 of them. I think I went through them in a fair amount of detail. I hope I did anyway. Let's now look at the picks of the day, and again doing that for FanDuel and DraftKings now. That graphic did not work at all because I've got this stupid bar in the way. I apologize for that. Let's take that off. Bang. All right, at FanDuel, point guard, I like Patty Mills at 3,900, Kyrie at 71, and Dame Lillard at 8,900. Shooting guards, Manu at 36 is a nice tournament option. Rod Hood at 54. There's no real high-priced shooting guard that I like at all. Small forwards, Kyle Anderson, 35. He's the pick of the cheap San Antonio players to me. Kawhi at 79, LeBron at 96. Power forwards, Trey Lyles at 4,000 with significant room to improve on that. Kristaps Porzingis at 6,900, and again, no real high-priced power forwards that are in the market here. At center, Tristan Thompson, 48, Rudy Gobert, 6,200. Over on DraftKings, a lot of these guys are the same. The salaries change and the scoring system changes as well, and that does make things a little bit different. Patty Mills at 3,600, still interesting to me. Derrick Rose at 5,800, I like him at that salary. I think that he is definitely worth a look over on DraftKings. And Kyrie at 8,000. Now, he's more expensive over on DraftKings, I guess because there's the bonus with the 3-pointers as well. But I still think that he is worth using over a Lillard or over a Curry in that scoring system. At shooting guard. Now, I talked about Allen Crabbe before. With the 3-point bonus, I like Crabbe over at DraftKings. He's at 3,400, so that's really cheap. He is someone you can look at if you're looking for a cheap shooting guard. The other guys, Rod Hood and the same sort of player over on FanDuel as well. Small forward, I like Kyle Anderson, but I also like Melo here at 7,600 with the scoring system over on DraftKings and his salary being a little bit reduced, and LeBron's at 9,000. Hard to go past him at that price point. At power forward, Trey Lyles is down at 3,600. Really hard to ignore Lyles at 3,600. That's a fantastic price. Porzingis is up at 7,400, but I do still like him. You could maybe interchange LaMarcus Aldridge there in the DraftKings setup, and Kevin Durant's power forward eligible over on DraftKings, so you can potentially fit Durant, James, and Anthony all into a lineup over on DraftKings, and then fill it out with Crabbe, with Anderson, with Mills, some of these cheaper players. At center, Zaza Pachulia at 4,000. That's a lot cheaper than what he was on FanDuel, so I do like him a little bit more over on DraftKings. And Gobert, he's up to 7,000. I think the double-double bonus works in his favour over on this site, and I think spending up for him at 7,000 is definitely something that I can get behind. All right, so that's it for the DFS portion of the show. We still got questions because you guys have sent in questions as I asked you to. So we're still going to answer your questions for the end of this podcast. Let's get to the questions now. I probably should do that. All right, the first one comes from Shahir's World. He says, besides minutes played, what are some good guidelines for fantasy basketball? Now, I could talk for an hour on this, Shahir's World. What are good guidelines? You want to look at role. You want to look at usage. Usage is mainly scoring, but it also means how often the ball is in this player's hands. If they're a Courtney Lee and they just sit around and not do much, then they're not really great for fantasy. You want them to be efficient. You want them to be really good defensively, or you want them to be involved in things. You want them to be a first, second, third option, not a fifth option, unless they're providing elite defensive numbers. But minutes is a good guideline, but role is the other one you really want to look at. Colin Fun says, who is more of a zero, Lance Stevenson or Jeff Green? Both get the saviour in the right role reputation, but Lance is ridiculed more. He is. He's also significantly worse than Jeff Green. Jeff Green is not great, but he's significantly better than what Lance Stevenson is. So who's more of a zero? Lance Stevenson's more of a zero. Yeah, Jeff Green could be a 15-minute-a-night backup and be decent. I don't think Lance can really even be that at this point. Patrick A. Bennett II says, what is the lowest average free throw percentage shooter you can pair with Drummond in a 10-team roto league and stay afloat in free throw percentage? Long-time listeners to this podcast are going to know the answer already. The answer is there's nobody. 150%. There's nobody. You cannot pair... sorry, that's not true. You can pair Harden, you can pair Westbrook, Curry, Durant, put all those guys, you might get mid-table with Drummond. You might. It's not good enough. If you own Drummond in Rotisserie League, you're getting a 1. Unless another guy owns Jordan and Howard and Capella. And then you might get a 2. And if all those guys are spread amongst 4 teams, you still probably get a 2. Yeah, maybe you've got Harden, these other guys, and you get your free throw percentage up to 70%, 71%. You're not in the upper half of the table. The answer is, to stay afloat, you can't. Jeff Padre, in a heartbeat, who is this year's CJ McCollum and why? I don't necessarily think there's going to be a CJ McCollum. There's a number of guys you could look at the end of the draft who might play into that. Maybe it's Hood, maybe it's Gaz Harris, but there's all things sort of working against these guys doing that. Yeah, Jeff throws out Joel Embiid, who's going around that 90th pick, and he could definitely be that player, but the concern we have with him is minutes, but he seems to be beating a lot of his timetables at the moment, so he's a decent pick. I don't think we're necessarily... Look, we probably will, but I don't think we're necessarily going to have a guy that comes from the 9th round or so and jumps up to be a top 50 player. Luke Pettigrew says, who's the better last round lottery ticket, KJ McDaniels or Marquise Chris? Well, I guess it depends really on what position you're looking to fill. I think that McDaniels is going to be getting more minutes out of the gate, but if I'm picking one of them, I take Chris. Just a thought process for me. The blocks and threes potential. Jared Dudley's ahead of him. A clearer path to minutes in the long run. It's probably Chris to me at this point. Bugsy Moog says, does Aaron Baines own the worst hair-beard combo in all of sports? Yeah, probably. It's pretty bad. That hair is... Just normal hair would have been okay with that beard, but I can't really talk about beards, but it is a horrible... it's a horrible look that Bainesy is getting out there. Wesley Henderson says, I want to know your minutes leaders projections by position. Point guard, Westbrook. Shooting guard, Jim Harden. Small forward, Wiggo, Andrew Wiggins. Power forward, Parker, Jabari Parker. Center, Anthony Davis. Done. Nick Howe says, what happens to Boogie Cousins this year? Does he force a trade or hang out in Sacktown until free agency? I don't think he forces a trade. I think the Kings will seriously consider trading him around the trade deadline just to get some assets back. I don't think that he's in there going, you have to trade me. I'd say it's probably a 40% likelihood that he leaves this year. But if they're going to look at trading him, I think they have to do it this season so they can get some value back from him. So that's the way that I would be looking at that at the moment. We're done. That is the first podcast done. Tomorrow we'll be back with a full look back at the 3 games that were played, plus a preview of all of Wednesday's action. So make sure you are staying tuned to that. Subscribe. It's the easiest way to make sure you get all of the episodes. Leave a review. Do that on iTunes, on Stitcher, wherever. 5 stars is great. Positive feedback, negative, constructive criticism, whatever you want to do, chuck that in there as well. Don't forget tpublic.com/user/redrock_bball to support the podcast. Buy a t-shirt, betdsi.com and use the promo code LOCKED10 as well to get $10 free bet and 100% match on your first deposit at betdsi.com. Check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, all the team-specific shows, David Locke doing Locked On NBA as well, and the NFL stuff for all the NFL teams, Locked On NFL with Matt Williamson over there as well. Any number of podcasts that can suit your podcast consuming needs. We're done. The season's ready to go. I'm excited. You're excited. Tell your friends to get excited. Tell your friends to listen to this podcast, and plenty of you have been doing that, so I do appreciate that. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.